supposed to have two online. So. You made it 4:30. Do we have? We're supposed to have two people online, I think. Have they joined?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Ready? So it is like save the best for the last. So you enjoy your coffee. This is the most important one because we built all the frameworks, we discussed the challenge, but now we need peace to enjoy all those. Yeah? So without peace, I think most of the things that we build can crumble in a day or so. So as a lawyer and also an expert on peace building, I have the two meet is the right to peace. So I know the right to peace is not always discussed, but if you open the UN Charter, the first paragraph is actually the first preamble, the first sentence is about peace, because the UN was established to save generations from the scourge of war. So that is the right to peace. Then that was followed by 1984 resolution 939/11 on the right to peace. Obviously, it's a resolution, it is not binding. Then also we had almost 9 years ago, another resolution, declaration on the right to peace. We have also very important resolution on the permanent sovereignty of a state to use its natural resources, which is 1803 17 resolution. I'm mentioning this just to set the scene that the right to peace, even though in many cases just are declarations, but they are, I consider them, they are the fundamental part of the human rights system. Coming to Africa, Africa holds this, I'm just restating the obvious, so bear with me. Vast natural wealth, we know oil in Nigeria and Angola, copper in Zambia and the DRC, critical minerals like cobalt and the rare earths. I can continue mentioning some of them, up to 90% of global concentration. Africa also around 65% of global arable land, and so forth. Paradoxically, as we know, this wealth has no broad development wealth, and in many cases we see instability. We always, I don't like calling this a resource curse, but people call it the resource curse because that is what is happening. But also, we have to also remember that even before all the frameworks I mentioned, Africans have their own traditional value system. They have laws between themselves and the nature. For all the, even for trees, small ants, there are traditional laws that they were using for centuries. In modern times, we have institutions that, for example, the African Mining Vision adopted by African Union in 2009. We have also the 1980 Lagos Plan of Action. Also regionally, we have the 2009 ECOWAS Directive on Mining. We have also the SADC Protocol on Sustainable, Cooperative, and Community-Focused Management. We have also the Natural Resource Governance Framework, which was actually issued by one of the oldest organization, International Union of Conservation of Nature, established in 1948. Together, these frameworks would give us how to use natural resources in order to have sustainable peace. We all know that in many cases that we label like, okay, where did you find this? They call like a blood diamond and all those kind of things. I think in 2012, if you remember, there was Dodd-Frank in the US laws, which was, I think, terminated by Trump, which forces companies to know or to show the sources of the minerals or the materials they use to produce like cell phones and others. Our panel discussion is going to be a little bit open because peace is very cross-sectoral. It's in its nature, interdisciplinary. So my panelists is both online and here will discuss areas that are very, I'm not going to ask questions. I let them present the way they have prepared, and then I will open for the discussion. We have 4 panelists, 2 here, 2 online. I would like them to introduce themselves actually. So let me, ladies first from online, would you mind starting this, kick off this discussion? Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's my turn, so I'm speaking here. Thank you for inviting me to this panel discussion. My name is Cäcilie Gallic. I'm a policy analyst at the OECD Center for Responsible Business Conduct at the OECD. Thanks here. I think we'll make a round of introductions, right? So if that's what I understood correctly, so I pass over.
I think you can continue your presentation.
Okay, great. In that case, I just share my screen. I hope everyone will be able to see it because I did prepare a short presentation. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So yes, thanks for the invitation. I really extend my gratitude to the organizers of this event. As I will explain in a minute, the African continent really sits at the heart of the work we are doing at the OECD on responsible supply chains. And I'm delighted to be with you to share my experience today. So as mentioned already, minerals have the potential to promote peace and prosperity where they are extracted, and global mineral demand is expected to rise to unprecedented levels over the next decade. The African continent alone is home to over 30% of the world's mineral wealth. And as we speak, the production of gold, copper, tin, lithium, and many other minerals resources is increasing on the continent. Now, what we still need to acknowledge is that there is an important impact that comes with mining on societies. And in the absence of appropriate risk management systems, mining can involve adverse impacts from conflict financing to financial crimes and gross human rights abuses, to mention only some of the most severe risks. Responsible business conduct, what we at the OECD call in short RBC, and the tools that have been developed for it can help companies mitigate these and other risks linked to mineral production and trade. And this is really where I'll be focusing my presentation on the role of RBC and how it can contribute to what we are looking at as part of this panel on sustainable local development in the mineral sector and in, of course, mineral-rich producing countries. So to start off on the standards landscape on responsible business conduct, I would like to delve right into our work on the OECD guidance, so what we call the OECD guidance, but in long OECD due diligence guidance for responsible supply chains of minerals from conflict and high-risk affected conflict-affected and high-risk areas. So over now 15 years ago, that's the time we've been working on this, but over 15 years ago, the OECD embarked together with stakeholders such as the 12 member states of the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region, ICGLR, and civil society and industry from Central Africa on a multi-stakeholder process with one objective: co-crafting solutions to help ensure the production and trade of mineral resources is responsible and meets the expectation of international buyers and investors. So the result is the minerals guidance, as I outlined just now, which today serves as a common reference for supply chain actors across metal markets. So in essence, the guidance provides a practical due diligence framework, which helps companies make sure that their sourcing decisions and practices do not contribute to financial crime, insecurity, and conflict, but rather to sustainable development in mineral-rich producing countries. How does that work in practice? So companies are supposed, if they apply due diligence, to identify and manage risks throughout the entire supply chain. This involves miners, local exporters, traders, and mineral processors, up to manufacturers that use minerals in their products. And really, their objective should be to achieve an understanding of their supply chain, to have a visibility over the supply chain, as then be able to assess the risks while prioritizing the most severe risks that may be present in the supply chain, such as conflict financing, financial crimes, and human rights abuses. So in doing so, the idea for the guidance is that a company that applies the due diligence framework can stay engaged in mineral producing countries that are perceived as presenting significant risks and which otherwise would just have been cut out of global supply chains. So the idea is to stay engaged and really prevent anything from that could resemble to a blanket disengagement approach. And the guidance, was conceived in the context of Central Africa in 2011, back then in that situation, historic context. But today it really applies to all regions and all mineral supply chains. And that is very important. And I'll come back to the global character of the guidance. I would like to outline some very important principles about this guidance and how it is used. It's that its purpose is really, and its application is supposed to be risk-based. That is, the more severe and likely the identified risk, the more intensive the due diligence and monitoring that is expected from companies. The importance here is that due diligence is not intended to provide 100% certainty on the conflict-free status of minerals, but rather companies shall focus on the processes to identify and prevent and mitigate their risks, and to work together with their suppliers to make sure that harmful practices are mitigated. So the idea is not from one day to the other to address all risks, but focus on the improvement that companies, suppliers, and other actors that are involved in due diligence can make together, with a focus, therefore, on good faith efforts and continuous improvement over time. From gold diggers in West Africa to large-scale mining companies in Latin America, gold refineries in Turkey or China, or bullion banks in New York, the practical implementation of the guidance is underpinned by regulation with global reach. Today, we see market exchanges such as the London Bullion Market Association, but also the London metal exchange and lawmakers in both OECD and non-OECD countries require operators throughout the supply chain to conduct due diligence and mitigate risks.
Sorry, can you, the slides are not moving, so.
Oh. Yeah, sorry, it's because I didn't have another slide actually, but I'm moving now to the other one already. I was still on the right one. I just went a little bit beyond what's written on the supply on the slide. But yeah, I actually finished here this slide, so I'm fine with the other one. What I wanted to outline now next is the whole of supply chain approach for due diligence in the mineral sector. So to make due diligence feasible and practicable also from a business perspective, the idea of the guidance and the spirit still is that the supply chain is split into two segments, upstream and downstream companies, with different roles and responsibilities for each country. On this slide, you see a little bit the kind of supply chain as it can be conceived. And upstream companies, as understood by the guidance, is everything that is from mine up to the point in the supply chain where the mineral undergoes a significant transformation and where there are relatively few actors involved. So technically speaking, this is the smelter or the refiner, which we understand as being the choke point. So there's a highest amount of leverage because obviously there are few actors, and then therefore there's also a sort of traceability that is possible from the choke point up to the mine. So for upstream companies, what is expected by the guidance is for them to have a visibility over their supply chain. So either through the adoption of a traceability or a chain of custody approach. And then also there's the expectation for them to identify what we call red flag supply chains, where there is a likelihood of certain risks given the circumstances of the supply chain, and where those red flags are identified, they are supposed to undertake on-the-ground assessments of mines and producers and traders to verify the circumstances of mineral trade and production and be able to obviously identify and mitigate the risks together with those suppliers. Now, beyond engagement with direct suppliers, collaborative engagement with local governments, CSOs, local business as a whole is expected for companies to be better positioned to prevent and mitigate impacts and to also be able to monitor corrective action as the risk is being mitigated. Now going over to downstream companies. So here is everything we have from choke points up to OEMs, original equipment manufacturers. They are expected to, first of all, identify the choke points in their supply chain, right? Which are the smelters and refiners in their supply chain, and then engage with these and collect information to be able to understand if these choke points do perform due diligence and how they perform due diligence. This can be through third-party auditing, but it should ideally go beyond to make sure that downstream companies have access to relevant information. And then there is the idea for downstream companies to use collective industry leverage to encourage improvement of upstream due diligence over time. Again, we really are here in a perspective of continuous improvement rather than changing practices from one day to the other. There's also a role beyond this private sector, which is outlined here on the slide, for governments and civil society. So obviously through policy-making decisions, governments can create the enabling environment for responsible mineral supply chains, let it be through legal frameworks or just to other practices, policies that do promote anything that relates to collecting information to enable due diligence and other approaches. Civil society do have also a role, an important one, as watchdogs, obviously. They can monitor mining sector governance and companies' behavior throughout global supply chains on a very local level. We've seen a lot of engagement within the context of Central Africa to local monitoring committees that really play an essential role in making sure that any information on risks that are happening on the ground can feed down the supply chain to help inform due diligence practices and risk mitigation. Companies, importantly, are also expected to collaborate with CSOs and and governments, let it be on a local level or an international level, to make sure that supply chain risks can be prevented and mitigated. Now, I think talking about sustainable development, obviously ASM, artisanal and small-scale mining, is a very important aspect to the discussion. The OECD guidance recognizes that production and sourcing of ASM, when done in a formal and responsible manner, has the potential to foster sustainable economic development in mining communities. It can also help, when formalized, increase public revenues, but also reduce the share of, let's say, unscrupulous actors or mineral production that contributes to major supply chain risks. Overall, the OECD guidance really is the first government-backed international standard to openly acknowledge the positive contribution of the artisanal sector to local economic development. It encourages buying minerals from ASM, so downstream companies are encouraged to engage with ASM and ideally be able to purchase from ASM, provided that ASM activities are legitimate. I underline legitimate, not legal. The emphasis is really on legitimate ASM, and that adequate due diligence is carried out and risks identified and managed accordingly. Now, there's a detailed appendix. I might not go in all the details, but in the guidance on how companies can do mine site assessment, support formalization, legalization, traceability, but also provide financial support to ASM miners to help them build secure, transparent and verifiable supply chains. We do, and that's something we've seen a lot in our work, that there are still important barriers for certain companies to engage directly with ASM. And we did publish an FAQ I put on this slide just for your references, that is really addressed to companies and outlines specific questions companies can ask themselves to help engage their engagement with ASM. So the question of legal versus legitimate ASM is addressed here, but many others as well. And again, I won't be into detail, but this is supposed to help companies engage. Obviously, companies do have a role, but here again, governments, donors, international organizations, companies in the supply chain beyond downstream, and civil society organizations do play an important role to help support ASM formalization as well. Obviously in accordance with national laws and policies and the circumstances of the respective supply chain, but a collaborative approach to ASM formalization really seems very important to us, and that's something that has come through a lot of our past work experience over the last decade and so as well. Going beyond ASM, I did want to dive a little bit into the question of critical mineral supply chains, just because that is a narrative that obviously is very dominant in current policy engagement, including in Africa. We've heard about various government-to-government partnerships being signed. And so I'd just like to present a little bit the role of RBC and the role that RBC can play in this context. So just as a reminder, obviously we know demand for critical minerals is expected to increase significantly due to the energy and digital transitions. We also do know that to meet this demand, what is needed is substantial increases in investment in the exploration, extraction, and production of key minerals. However, the secure supply of those critical minerals, as they're called, cannot be contingent on investment in low-risk environments, just because we do know that a lot of these minerals that are called critical are located in jurisdictions which present certain risks in terms of corruption, financial crimes, insecurity, or others in terms of environmental risks and social risks as well. So for supply to be able to keep up with demand, mining investment will need to increase into these areas, including areas with significant risks. And that is where we see that RBC really can be a tool for companies to help make sure that this investment can happen, because the objective is enabling investment in certain areas that would have otherwise just been cut off of formal global supply chains. At the same time, we also know that, and this is something I wanted to present a little bit, is that overlooking RBC risks can disrupt investment. So what this makes reference to is that if a company prioritizes ad hoc deal making and corruption, that over time, this type of engagement is prone to manifest into larger conflicts, into investment impediments, and may spark also community protests that ultimately can lead to sudden supply chain disruptions. So that is something on the slide you can see different scenarios of environmental impacts not being properly addressed, or maybe an operator that allows petty corruption of that leading to the loss of the social license to operate for the company, or also something we've seen a lot in Central Africa, the opposition between large-scale mining and artisanal mining not being properly addressed due to conflict of interests, and that then leading also to ultimately a suspension of production due to different incidences and tensions. So there's really a case for applying RBC to make sure that not only mineral supply is responsible, but also that those supply flows to the critical minerals going to the industries is stable in the long term as well. And what we advocate for in that case is that there should be a global level playing field around shared RBC standards, again, including the perspective of mineral producing and mineral consuming countries to make sure that the shared practices are being applied along all these supply chains and the countries involved. Now, to just finish off, obviously, we do understand that any discussion on how to make critical minerals work for sustainable growth and development needs to go beyond RBC. Mineral beneficiation, tax policies, industrial development, additional components that are vital to any strategy that seeks to make critical minerals work for sustainable growth and development. Now, how to arbitrate between those various objectives requires a nuanced debate, taking into account the perspective of all countries in the supply chain. For net importers of minerals, policy approaches such as export restrictions and industrial policies can often be seen as impeding access to critical raw materials. On the other hand, for net exporters, so mineral producing countries, such policies are often seen as indispensable for economic development and domestic. And indeed, the OECD restrictions can, under specific circumstances, be associated with increases in domestic value addition. So the point here is really that it's neither, it's not an either or, but that in fact, domestic value addition and security of supply need to go hand in hand. And economic security and local development do not have to clash. It is more a question of how to target respective policies appropriately. And in this regard, at the OECD, we launched an initiative on critical minerals for sustainable growth and development that brings together net importing and mineral-rich producing countries in open discussions to help identify regional specific challenges, development goals, best practices, and opportunities for evidence-based collective action across critical mineral value chains. And this is something, again, I really wanted to highlight in this discussion, because RBC as a tool alone, while it can help foster economic responsible investment and therefore economic development in producing countries, should not be seen as the sole lever for engagement to foster local development. I stop here. I thank you for the opportunity to present our work and to feed into the discussion. And I'm looking forward to the remaining contributions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are you staying with us or?
Yes, I stay on.
Okay. Then we'll come back for the question at the later stage. Our next presenter, we can also do online just in case. We don't know what will happen with the technology. So you can introduce yourself and proceed, please.
Thank you very much, and greetings from Lusaka. I'm happy to be part of the panel. So my name is Ian Mwinga. I'm the National Coordinator for the Zambia EITI Secretariat. For those of you that don't know what the EITI is the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. Yeah, so I think today's topic is actually quite fitting. I'm at a loss to actually choose what to say, because listening from the previous panels, it seems to me that I'll be preaching to the converted. But I'll try by all means to make it really practical and see if we can have a conversation around this critical issue of natural resources and peace building. Unfortunately, I do not have a formal presentation because I want to maximize on the bandwidth. I'll really speak in terms of what are the practical issues taking place. And I think I'll take it upon from the angle of some of the risks that are inherent in the mining value chain, and using transparency as an instrument to deal and mitigate some of these risks. And I think for me, the first port of call, which is the entry point, would be, the award of mining licenses, especially in this environment of critical or in some instances, strategic minerals. What does this process actually entail? So we have seen in most instances that we are seeing a lot of decisions being fast-tracked. The risks around fast-tracking of awarding mining rights. And I like the fact that the previous presenter made mention in terms of what are some of the remedies that are available to sovereigns, for example, to mitigate the risks of corruption, for example. And I think I address my mind initially to issues, for example, identifying the beneficial owners of these mining rights, the people that are applying for these mining rights. Who are they? And here I'm not talking about the shareholders. I'm talking about the beneficial owners, the bone and flesh behind these, usually very complicated structures. And I think in my view, we ought to pay attention to those issues. The other thing really relates to issues around conflict of interest. How do we deal with situations where we have, for example, politically exposed individuals applying for mining rights? Remember that our cadasters are being run by civil servants. And when they come into contact with politically exposed individuals, how do they deal with the power imbalance in that situation? And I think for me, it's one of the things that ought to be looked at. But again, increasingly, we obviously all know that there is a conversation around ESG. I dare say that, in fact, I think the ESG is probably wrongly sequenced. We should be talking about GSE. And I'll present my arguments why that should be so. Because in my view, the E and the S are creatures of the G. If you don't get your governance correct, it simply means your E and your S will actually be at risk. I'll give an example. If you issue a mining right to an individual, a company, it is expected that alongside those rights, there are obligations, your social obligations and your environmental obligations. Therefore, if that license is actually issued in a fraudulent or corrupt manner, it essentially means that your E and your S will not be enforced by any regulation because of the way they are actually issued. So therefore, I dare argue that beyond just looking at the corporate governance, the internal, the G in terms of the internal side of the companies, we also ought to address our minds in terms of how is the governance on the public sector side? How are the cadasters managed, and so on and so forth? I'll swiftly move on to the role of state-owned enterprises in this space. You will realize that, and and I like the fact this was brought by the previous presenter, that there is an increasing desire in these jurisdictions to actually retain a lot of value from these critical minerals domestically. And this, in most cases, is actually understood to mean resource nationalism. So how do you strike a balance between the role of the state-owned enterprises in this space and also the value that is supposed to accrue to investors? And we know the complexities around state-owned enterprises, especially we have seen in this part of the world where state-owned enterprises have actually gone ahead to sign in resource-backed loans, for example. They have gone into commodity trading. They have gone into revenue or resource sharing mechanisms. And these are very complex structures. When you look internally in the public service, those skills are not readily available. So then how do you deal with the risks that come with such complicated structures being created on the back of, in some cases, resource nationalism, and in some cases, very good intentions of actually, retaining value within the jurisdiction? And therefore, flowing from there, again, piggybacking on the earlier presentation around issues of responsible sourcing, how do we ensure that the supply chains are actually above board? They are not tainted by material that is illegally or illegally sourced, from conflict minerals and so on and so forth. Then again, we have sort of, I think, the elephant in the room around issues of value addition. How do we add value? If, for example, in this part of the world, which is the Southern Africa, we have an energy deficit, because for you to add value, you need adequate electricity that is accessible, that is priced fairly, in very, transparent contracts, the power purchase agreements, and so on and so forth. So we do need to deal with these, constraints that speak to the aspect of value addition. Now, this is interesting because, for example, the entrance of the EU, for example, even the US in the critical mineral space, is actually premised on the fact that value is going to be added here. We are going to move away from supply chains, which is your pit to port, kind of arrangement. And this sounds like a conundrum, because without the energy, then all that becomes really unattainable. And then swiftly moving on to your transport corridors. There's a lot of talk and hype around the Lobito corridor. To what extent that corridor really represents a shared value with the jurisdictions that are actually, at the core of that. And here I'm talking about Angola, DRC, and Zambia. Are the initial objectives of that project literally still holding firm? We know that, for example, the interconnector between DRC and Zambia is going to cost north of $6 billion to actually have the rail connecting into Zambia. So how does that fit into this scheme of things where countries like Zambia are riddled with the debt and so on and so forth? The other thing that I wish to highlight perhaps a little bit quickly is the access to geological data. And here, we cannot talk about potential of critical minerals in the absence of data. We need to know which critical minerals are where, what are the quantities, what are the values. And I dare say a few months ago, DRC actually constrained the export of cobalt. We also saw how the price of cobalt, reacted to that. I think cobalt is sitting way around $24,000 per ton as of last week, Friday. But then again, you contrast that with the export ban of lithium, by Zimbabwe. Was there any effect on the market? And then again, we swiftly moved to countries like Indonesia that have used their price advantage to control the pricing of nickel the nickel markets. So we see these dynamics in terms of, which jurisdiction can actually dictate where value and risk actually stays. So the question perhaps that we ought to ask ourselves, especially in the African sub-region, is that, is our contribution to the global critical minerals, space, the net effect, can the world really feel the presence or absence of Africa? I dare say, if, for example, Zambia and DRC stop producing copper, can Chile and Peru and Australia and perhaps Canada still, keep up the prices the way they are? Possibly, yes. So to close it off, I think as the Africans, especially in the sub-region, we need to know that this window of opportunity is actually not endless. We need to take advantage of this opportunity and make sure that whatever value is realized from the critical minerals is actually a shared value that will ensure that our industrial policies are actually underpinned based on these mineral resources that we have. And then, therefore, also encourage, the development of local content through supplier development programs. And here I'm not talking about tenderpreneurs, people that just get contracts and supply and they cut loose, but really having a supplier development program that aims to build, the suppliers in the whole entire value chain. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Are you staying with us? Okay. Now we come to the live panelists. Now I give the opportunity to Kader to present his case.
Donc, merci, Monsieur le modérateur. Merci aussi aux organisateurs de cette journée portée sur l'Afrique. Donc, je suis Kader Afane, je suis ancien chercheur à l'université de Niamey. Je travaille depuis un moment sur les industries extractives, notamment sur l'artisanat minier. Donc, le travail que la communication que je vais vous présenter aujourd'hui émane d'une partie de mes recherches sur le terrain, mais aussi à travers une étude que nous avons faite pour la Haute Autorité à la consolidation de la paix du Niger. Donc, notamment sur les conflits dans le secteur minier, or et uranium. Donc, c'est pour cela que j'ai intitulé la présentation « Exploitation minière et conflits. Quelle gestion pour une paix durable ?» Donc, je vais revenir au cours de cette présentation sur l'exploitation minière, même si beaucoup a été donné depuis ce matin. Et comment ça s'est fait et quels sont les conflits liés à cette exploitation pour proposer à la fin des pistes comment le Niger gère ces conflits entre les différents acteurs. Donc, une petite bref aperçu du Niger. Donc, c'est situé en Afrique de l'Ouest avec une superficie d'1 267 000 km². Donc, plus de 2 fois la France ou 60 fois peut-être la Slovénie. Donc, avec 65% de son territoire situé en zone désertique, une population de 26 millions d'habitants qui se retrouve dans la bande sud du pays et qui est en majeure partie agriculteur, agro-pasteur, si on peut le dire. Donc 90% de la population elle est rurale et la moitié de la population a moins de 15 ans. Donc en 2023, le PIB par habitant est estimé à $611. Exploitation minière, donc il faut savoir qu'au Niger, il y a... Donc, désolé, depuis ce matin on travaille, moi je vais vraiment dire qui est présent au Niger. Donc l'exploitation de l'uranium au Niger, elle est faite par ces 4 sociétés. D'abord, nous avons Orano, qui est détenteur de 3 permis, donc avec la société Somaïr, Cominact et Imoraren SA. Après, nous avons la Somina, qui est la Société des mines d'Azélique, donc qui est détentée à la fois par les Chinois et le Niger. Donc, nous avons tout récemment aussi la mise en place de Global Atomic Corporation, qui a mis en place la société Somida, donc qui a un permis toujours au nord du Niger, hein, donc la Somida, Société des mines de Daza. Et nous avons aussi l'autre groupe canadien, Govex Iranium, qui est aussi détenteur d'un permis d'uranium au nord Niger. Donc, parmi ces sociétés, il y a qui est Somina, donc les Chinois, Société des mines d'Azélique, qui a commencé l'exploitation depuis 2007 jusqu'en 2015, qui sont arrêtés en 2015 suite à, comme ils l'ont dit, à la baisse du minerai sur le marché international. Donc, Orano, qui a ces trois sociétés, dont Cominac s'est arrêté depuis 2021, Imoraren s'est arrêté en 2014, donc le projet n'a pas redémarré. Donc il y a eu des premiers travaux, mais ça s'est arrêté après, en 2014. Et aujourd'hui, il y a que la Somaïr qui marche. Global Atomic sont en train de se mettre en place. Donc ils ont eu le permis il y a 3 ans ou 4 ans de cela. Donc la société est déjà dans sa phase, ils ont fini les études, donc ils sont dans la phase exploratoire. Il est de même que Govex. Donc, juste une petite présentation des trois sociétés d'Urano. Donc, la Somaïr, qui a commencé l'exploitation depuis 1971. La Somaïr et la Cominac sont des sociétés d'Urano, donc ancêtres d'Arriva, donc qui sont au Niger depuis les années 50. Donc, ces deux sociétés sont détenues à la fois par Orano, mais par la Sopamine, donc par l'État du Niger. Par exemple, la Somaïr est détenue à 63% par Orano et 36% par le Niger. Donc, la Cominac disait qu'il a fermé en 2012 est détenue à 69% par l'Orano et 31% par le Niger. Donc, tout récemment, après l'arrêt de la Cominac, ils ont lancé le projet RDS, c'est-à-dire le réhabilitation du site. Donc, Imoraren, dont le permis a été octroyé à Orano en 2007. Donc, ils ont lancé les premiers travaux de décapage, de la mise en place des trous. Ça sera une mine à ciel ouvert. Malheureusement, aussi, les travaux se sont arrêtés en 2014. Donc, Imoraren, elle est détenue à 66% par Orano et 33% par l'État du Niger. Donc, après ces sociétés minières, depuis 2015, suite à un front pionnier parti de la Namibie, oui, depuis 2009, il y a eu l'arrivée vers l'or au Niger en 2014, où beaucoup de sites d'or ont été découverts, toujours dans la partie nord où se faisait l'exploitation de l'uranium. Donc il y a eu beaucoup de sites d'or qui ont été découverts, et ce qui a entraîné une ruée importante des populations nigériennes, mais aussi tchadiennes, burkinabés, béninois, algériens, libyens et maliens. Donc, en termes de productivité, donc là, d'habitude, je n'aime pas les données parce que c'est toujours souvent pas fiable, mais là, je rapporte les données de l'EITI, donc dans un rapport de l'EITI Niger, dans un rapport de 2024. Donc, dans le premier paragraphe sur la production minière, donc on voit l'uranium en 2021. Donc, le Niger a produit presque 2000 tonnes sur une valeur de 105 milliards de CFA. Donc, en or, on a produit 3000 tonnes. Si on compare avec les revenus, donc le deuxième tableau, on va tirer de ces sociétés minières. Donc, on voit la Somaïr. Donc, toujours en 2022, l'État du Niger a gagné 9 milliards en termes de recettes de la société. Avec Govex, l'État du Niger a gagné 5 milliards en CFA. Donc, qui sont les deux sociétés actuellement en exercice. Donc, en termes de répartition des revenus par secteur, donc l'ensemble du secteur minier apporte à l'État du Niger 32,4 milliards selon les données de l'EITI en 2022. contrairement aux hydrocarbures qui ont, donc notamment l'exploitation du pétrole, donc qui a apporté 150 milliards pour le pays en 2022. Donc après cette brève présentation de l'exploitation, donc on a au cours de cette étude dont j'ai parlé de 2019 de la HACP, on a établi un certain nombre de conflits dans le secteur minier. Donc par conflit, il faut voir le conflit d'une manière large. Même les frustrations communautaires, on a pris ça étant comme des conflits. Même si ce n'est pas ouvert, peut-être ça peut se déclencher plus tard en conflit ouvert, et même en conflit armé. Donc, il y a ce qu'on a appelé les conflits de gouvernance autour du secteur minier, qui sont liés au développement des frustrations communautaires à l'égard des entreprises minières industrielles du fait de l'environnement de travail offert. Souvent, ces entreprises, souvent chinoises ou françaises, possèdent à des licenciements ou à même à ne pas respecter le cahier de charges environnementales. Il y a les conflits entre communautés et autorités liées au non-respect de la loi, notamment les redevances minières aux collectivités. Souvent,
Abdul Kader, just 2 minutes to wrap up, but we are running out of time. So.
OK. Donc, le conflit entre l'État central et les sociétés, notamment à travers la fermeture de la frontière Niger-Bénin aujourd'hui, suite aux événements que vous connaissez. Donc, depuis un moment, l'Orano n'arrive plus à exporter son uranium. Ce qui a poussé à un moment donné ce conflit donc, au retrait du permis d'Imouraren. Donc, les autorités actuelles ont vu, dans un élan de souveraineté nationale, ont retiré les permis à Imouraren et aussi à Goviakas. Ces conflits, ça s'est traduit aussi par l'arrêt du projet RDS, donc par l'aménagement du site de la Cominact, par la société Orano qui disait qu'ils n'ont pas les moyens nécessaires pour continuer. Donc, le conflit lié à l'exploitation aussi au niveau de leur paillage, la délimitation des puits, notamment liée aux autorisations semi-mécanisées qui est donnée par l'État sans pouvoir être respectée sur place. Je vais aller vite. Donc, conflit lié à la dégradation de l'environnement, donc des communautés. On a vu ça aussi ce matin. Donc, comme le disait Sarah ce matin, donc l'impact de l'exploitation sur le pastoralisme. Des terres pastorales sont occupées par les sites miniers sans dédommagement, donc, qui a suivi. Environnement autour des sites, là vous avez les photos de la société Somina qui a arrêté son exploitation en 2015, mais qui a laissé tout ça derrière elle, sans aménagement. Donc vous voyez sur des sites à ciel ouvert qui sont accessibles à toute personne passant par là. Donc, forte demande en eau, ce qui peut poser aussi un problème à long terme. On est dans une zone désertique enregistrant moins de 150 mm par an. Et tout le travail de leur paillage ou même de l'exploitation iranifère, c'est fait avec l'utilisation de l'eau. Utilisation des acides aussi, on en a parlé ce matin aussi. Vous avez là tous ces produits chimiques sont déversés dans la nature sans respect des textes et du cadre juridique existant, avec l'utilisation des cyanures, donc la coupe du bois dans une zone désertique où les rares végétations, donc les rares arbustes qui sont datés déjà des années. Conflits communautaires, banditisme lié à l'or. Donc, tous ces conflits sont gérés au niveau central de l'État, mais aussi au niveau des régions et des communes, et jusqu'au niveau des sites. Par exemple, l'existence de cette institution, la HACP, qui est la haute autorité à la consolidation de la paix, donc pour promouvoir la cohésion sociale, donc elle procède à des caravanes de sensibilisation et d'information des populations donc, sur comment vivre en paix entre acteurs directement impactés par ces sociétés et populations civiles. Donc, existence d'un comité régional de paix à Agadez, par exemple, qui est dirigé par les autorités suprêmes et par toutes les personnes et acteurs concernés. L'existence d'un bureau des études environnementales, donc détenteur de permis minier doit faire une étude d'impact environnemental, même si à côté, c'est comme l'ont dit les panélistes ce matin, hein. Donc on a les institutions, mais la mise en place souvent pose des problèmes. Le BIE n'a pas les moyens même d'aller sur le terrain. Souvent, c'est les mêmes entreprises qui payent tout pour les faire déplacer. Donc, existence des structures de la société civile, existence des observatoires, existence des comités de gestion des sites d'orpaillage. Donc, l'orpaillage au Niger, surtout dans la zone nord, c'est fait dans des zones reculées où l'État n'est même pas présent. Et heureusement que ce comité de gestion représente l'État dans ces zones et tout conflit qui intervient est géré par ce comité de gestion qui sont reconnus par l'ensemble des acteurs en place. Après, il y a l'existence du cadre juridique, donc d'un code minier datant de 2022, même si les textes relatifs aux obligations sociales et environnementales des compagnies ne sont pas appliqués. Amendement et modification du cadre juridique, donc politique de formalisation, on en a parlé aussi ce matin. L'action sociétale des entreprises, donc notamment tout ce que les entreprises minières et uranifères ou aurifères font. Donc là, nous avons un projet financé par... désolé. Hein. Bon, j'ai perdu, mais c'est...
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry for rushing you, because I think we gave too much time for the first presenters. Okay, Jean-Pierre.
Bon, merci beaucoup pour la parole. Je tiens à mon tour aussi à remercier le gouvernement de la Slovénie qui nous a facilité le déplacement jusqu'ici, et Aïva particulièrement aussi. Alors, je suis Jean-Pierre Okenda, je travaille pour une organisation non gouvernementale qui s'appelle la Sentinelle de ressources naturelles, qui est basée au Congo, dont je viens de la RDC. Alors, je sais que quand on intervient en dernier, ce n'est pas facile, surtout lorsqu'on sait que les modérateurs commencent à presser le temps. Je vais essayer d'aborder des aspects dans cette conversation pour avoir le temps de dire quelque chose, un message, et de ne pas rentrer sur tout le reste. Je sais qu'on peut parler de la RDC, beaucoup de choses. La première chose que je voudrais que vous puissiez savoir, je crois que vous le savez déjà, parce que mon ministre a intervenu ce matin ici en parlant de notre pays, qui joue un rôle central dans la transition énergétique et même dans la crise climatique. Ça, je crois quand même que les raisons, elles sont assez géographiques. Moi, je parle d'une dotation naturelle de la RDC ou d'une dotation de l'Afrique. Quelques chiffres avant vraiment de poser mon problème, un peu la conversation sur un sujet de politique ou d'approche d'exploitation. Nous sommes premiers producteurs de cobalt, sans vous le savez, qu'en termes de réserves, nous avons des réserves connues de cobalt en 60%. Nous sommes deuxième leader mondial de production de cuivre. Et donc, après le Chili, et vous savez qu'en termes de qualité de géologie, lorsqu'on prend les 3 zones, ce que nous appelons le triangle de la production de cuivre, l'Amérique latine, vous prenez l'Europe avec la Finlande et consorts, tout ça, et l'Afrique, vous savez que nous avons une très bonne géologie en Afrique lorsqu'on parle de la région de Copper Belt Region, donc en nous et la Zambie. Donc, ça, c'est un peu le potentiel. Je vous dispense de tout ce qui est manganèse. Les productions de mines maintenant de classe mondiale, des zinc et des germanium actuellement qui sont entrés en production cette année avec Ivanhoe, donc à Kipushi. Je vous dispense le fait quand même qu'il y a des découvertes d'environ 1 milliard de tonnes de lithium dans la partie orientale, dans le sud-est du pays, le nord du Katanga. Donc, la RDC, en gros, c'est un scandale géographique, plutôt donc géologique. Mais là, je voulais attirer votre attention parce que c'est le but de mon sujet de la conversation d'aujourd'hui. C'est que tout ce que je vous présente là, c'est bon, mais il faut regarder les indicateurs de la RDC en matière de pauvreté ou de développement pour comprendre en fait les extrémités, et c'est le sujet que moi je vais aborder aujourd'hui. D'un côté, vous avez tous ces tableaux-là, mais de l'autre côté, nous sommes parmi les 5 pays les plus pauvres au monde. Et ça, ce sont un peu de données. Donc, si on parle de pauvreté dans le monde, la RDC fait partie des 5 pays les plus pauvres au monde. 73% des Congolais en 2023 ont vécu avec moins de 2 dollars américains. Donc, le Congolais, 73% des populations congolaises, estimées actuellement à 100 millions de populations donc, au Congo. Et on vous dit aussi que sur 6 personnes qui vivent dans la pauvreté la plus extrême en Afrique, 1 personne est au Congo. Donc, vous voyez-vous quand même un peu cette gap, cette disconnexion d'un pays qui est vraiment aux extrémités, en fait, quoi. Et c'est là où j'introduis ma conversation sur la paix, finalement, la consolidation et les ressources naturelles. Parce que pour moi, en fait, quels sont les facteurs, en fait, qui expliquent de quoi cette situation-là? Le premier, pour moi, c'est le paradigme. C'est le paradigme de ressources donc naturelles. Et pour moi, le paradigme ici, en fait, le paradigme remonte, en fait, que ce qui se passe... Oui, je vois. Je vais aller vite. On vous signale qu'il reste 5 minutes là-bas. Oui, je vais me présenter là-dessus sur un sujet. Je vais parler de tous les côtés, je vais au moins dire un sujet. Je vais parler un peu de cette thématique du paradigme. Où se trouve en réalité, comment est-ce qu'on explique quand même que le pays qui a cette position, en fait, demeure avoir une population extrêmement pauvre? Le problème en réalité, quand vous regardez la chaîne de valorisation des batteries, quand vous la regardez, on commence à comprendre le problème. Vous allez voir que nous avons les maillons qu'on appelle donc l'extraction des mines. Vous avancez, vous allez arriver vers la transformation qu'on appelle les raffineries, les producteurs des batteries qu'on sort. Quand vous prenez la chaîne, vous verrez que la RDC n'est que tout simplement au niveau du premier maillon, qui est le maillon de l'extraction. Et donc, lorsqu'on est dans le maillon de l'extraction en réalité, le pays a une économie qui est axée sur la rente. C'est-à-dire que la valeur ajoutée, en fait, la richesse qui est extraite du Congo actuellement, elle est en train d'enrichir les acteurs qui sont quand même en dehors du Congo. Pourquoi? Parce qu'au Congo, on est dans l'extraction. Il est connu que dans l'extraction, on pratique l'économie, en fait, de la rente. Et ça, c'est une structure économique coloniale, en fait. C'est exactement ce que Léopold a fait chez nous, c'est exactement ce que les Belges ont fait chez nous, et c'est exactement ce que continue aujourd'hui avec la Chine, probablement de manière aussi la plus... Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, I can see. So, et vous allez, je disais tantôt que quand vous regardez ces modèles-là, parce qu'il faut le comprendre, vous verrez que c'est exactement les modèles que la Chine fait, probablement avec plus de mal à l'Afrique, au Congo notamment. Parce que pour la Chine, il faut ajouter vraiment beaucoup de dommages sur l'environnement. Vous savez que la Chine, en termes de standards, même les standards que Cécilie a présentés ici, la difficulté que nous avons, c'est très bien. Tout ça, c'est les pays membres de l'OCDE. Mais le pays qui domine le secteur minier de la RDC, le cobalt et le cuivre en RDC, à 90%, c'est la Chine qui a le monopole. Donc, même quand nous parlons de ces standards ici, elles ont une application extrêmement limitée au Congo. Donc, je voulais attirer l'attention. Pourquoi j'en tire l'attention? Parce que ce qui se passe au Congo, c'est que tout le monde dit, et d'ailleurs, c'est la conversation qu'on a depuis ce matin, la transition énergétique est une opportunité, oui, très bien. Est-ce que c'est une opportunité pour réduire les gaps? Oui. Mais la transition, la demande des minéraux, que ce soit pour la transition énergétique, que ce soit pour le progrès technologique, n'est pas de l'argent au comptant, en fait. Moi c'est ça mon message. Donc, on ne peut pas dire que c'est tout de suite, quand ça vient, que voilà, et le Congo va gagner, que l'Afrique va gagner. Pourquoi? Parce que si on ne change pas le paradigme, qui est cette chaîne que moi, j'appelle ça, qui est ce modèle qui est axé sur l'extractivisme, en fait. De continuer à considérer que deux pays comme en Afrique généralement, et le pays comme le Congo vont continuer à être comme depuis des matières premières, dans lesquelles donc on prend les matières premières, on va les enrichir. Si ce n'est pas en Malaisie, c'est en Chine, et puis ça va remonter vers l'Europe et ça va vers les États-Unis. Ces modèles-là, de notre point de vue, il est important de quoi les changer. Le deuxième point, pour donc avancer un peu rapidement, parce que je sais qu'on a tout ça, c'est que vous allez voir que la conversation que nous avons autour des standards, quand on parle des questions des standards, quand vous regardez très bien, on parle des standards de l'angle de la chaîne d'approvisionnement uniquement. C'est-à-dire, oui, on va regarder, est-ce qu'il y a des Afans? Non, il n'y en a pas. Il n'y a pas d'Afans là-bas. Est-ce qu'il y a l'environnement? Oui, c'est respecté. Mais en fait, moi, je pense qu'un des standards importants sur lesquels on doit se mettre d'accord, c'est pour que nous puissions aller vers l'équité dans les commerces des matières premières. Il est extrêmement important qu'on puisse regarder aujourd'hui comment est-ce que, quand même, on assure que la mine, la matière première qui produit la richesse, comment on assure une répartition équitable avec l'Afrique. C'est extrêmement important. Moi, c'est là que je voudrais donc passer un peu plus de mon temps à parler sur des standards d'équité dans la valorisation des matières premières, comme l'a dit le coordonnateur, donc de quoi, tout ça. Alors, le dernier point que je vais aborder à ce niveau-là, c'est sur les standards. Cécilie en a parlé, je salue Cécilie sans passer parce que quand même, on se connaît très bien avec elle, on a travaillé par le passé, collaboré par le passé. Donc, pour moi, les questions de standards, ils sont bons. On peut les aborder ici comme nous parlons ce matin. Depuis le matin, on parle de ça. Mais quand vous regardez un peu l'écart, la disconnexion entre ce qui est au niveau global, toute cette conversation au niveau national, c'est extrêmement le jour et la nuit en réalité, quoi. Donc, tout ce que nous avons, développons comme standard, tout ce que nous parlons. Mais la question fondamentale, qui les applique au niveau de quoi des pays-là? Et ça m'amène au dernier point, si vous permettez, en une minute. Ça m'amène à la question, finalement, de cette gouvernance également qui est extrêmement faible chez nous. Gouvernance est faible. Je ne vais pas justifier les Africains en parlant de tout ce que pas de modèle ici. Je ne vais pas dire qu'on n'a pas de responsabilités, nous l'avons. Mais vous allez voir qu'on est là dans des pays dans lesquels il n'y a pas assez de capacités pour assurer que les standards qui sont développés sont effectivement quand même appliqués. Et deuxième problème de gouvernance, c'est au niveau des politiques. Je vous disais, en une minute, bien entendu, en une minute, je vais clôturer. C'est au niveau des politiques. Bon, regardez bien, en fait, quand je fais l'analyse des stratégies, combien de pays africains actuellement ont des stratégies sur la gestion des minéraux de transition énergétique? Il y en a combien? En tout cas, ce que je peux vous dire, c'est que dans mon pays, encore une stratégie spécifique, pas encore. Je sais que la Zambie a quand même fait un effort là-dessus. La Namibie est en train de développer. Les Maroc, je crois qu'ils ont pu faire une avancée. Si je me raconte, oui, effectivement, j'ai lu un peu sur le Maroc. L'Afrique du Sud, en cours de construire stratégie. Quand vous regardez, vous allez voir que les économies développées ont déjà des stratégies d'approvisionnement. Mais quand vous regardez l'Afrique, le pays producteur là-dessus, pour la plupart, n'ont même pas de stratégie. Donc, maintenant, prenez le cas de la RDC, qui a signé 6 partenariats stratégiques. Les Émiratis, la Chine, le Japon, les États-Unis, l'Union européenne et consorts, tout ça. La RDC va engager ce processus sur base de quel objectif stratégique du pays. Donc, ça, c'est notre problème de gouvernance que je voulais soulever, sur lequel je voulais insister sur le fait que on est là quand même, on est parti là sur de problèmes, de défis qui se posent d'un côté de ceux qui cherchent les minéraux, qui ont des stratégies, et de ceux qui doivent les minéraux, qui n'ont pas de stratégie. Ça, ce sont des défis importants. Je crois que je vais m'arrêter là pour ne pas quand même prendre beaucoup de temps. Peut-être qu'il y aura des questions, on va répondre. Merci.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. This is a very interesting subject, so I was not looking at your time, so my apologies. Even though the panelists is focused on the mining and the minerals, when we talk of natural resources there, we talk of forests, land, especially water. It was mentioned this morning. Again, from Morocco, it was mentioned, especially the trans-border, the rivers like Nile. We know at the end of the day, these are very critical. So in terms of the conflict, is probably we did mention the parties. We have then state actors, we have international corporations, we have also neighboring states that are creating problems because of this natural resource. I would like to say thank you to the 4 amazing panelists. I hope everybody got some insights from this. I will give 2 or 3 questions first. Let me thank them for the presentation first. Huh? Yeah, very short questions, but I see a lot of hands already. So I will start from 1, 2, 1 more, 3, 4. Now you are eating to your dinner, so I don't mind it now. Okay, proceed.
Thank you so much. My question very briefly to Jean-Pierre. I hope I got your name right. You speak about the DRC being a raw material supplier and that, you know, processing happens elsewhere, which essentially undercuts the value of what you guys are extracting. But I have a very, very short question. Can you afford to value add in country? Do you have the electricity to value add? Do you have the water to value add? And this is not only a question for the DR Congo, I think it's a question for many of our countries that are organizing a lot of symposiums these days talking about in-country value addition. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. All the panelists, I have learned a lot from your presentation, new perspectives. Regarding what has been pictured here by Professor Afane from Niger, this is relevant for all nomadic countries, the Sahelian countries, even I think other part of Africa like Central Africa, DRC. Yes, it's a core to the discussion. I think this is just an introduction, and we need to push deeper into this discussion. That he has just few time to say, Kader, Afane, I'm sorry that you had to pay the price for others who have taken so much time. And I would like also to say, with regard to the issues we have, I would like us to go beyond the issues. What are the solutions? We know the problems. Who has to do his homework? Africans. Nobody will do that for us. Who has to do, and we have solution. South-South cooperation, we have a lot of experts now in the continent, but we don't trust them. We go outside, we bring, I agree with international partnership, expertise, etc., but sometimes they miss the indigenous approach that we have. Sometimes we are lazy. Let us work hard, harder than we can. Let us put in place policies, strategies. Like, let's not just do like the monkeys do. We copy from the others' best practices, and we adapt. We don't copy paste, but we adapt to our situation. We are not victims. Africa has been there for always. We have indigenous knowledge. Let us sit and think critically what is at our core interests, how we can meet with the partners like Slovenia. Some are open, are trustful, they are honest, genuine in their approach, authentic in their approach with us. We have the raw material, we have the knowledge. Let us meet and share it. Equitable partnership, win-win partnerships, this is what it is about. But if Africa doesn't do its homework, we will always be abused, and we deserve it. Let us wake up and do the right thing to be done and walk the talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My question will go to Madame Le Gallic. I hope I pronounce your name very well. OECD being an EU organization or an EU institution, I have two questions for you. The first question is, in one of your slides, you mentioned traceability of the mining resources. Now, I will give a clear example, and so you can tell us at this point where OECD, how they trace this, and why is the European Commission partnering with another country in order to steal from the resources of another. We'll take the example of Rwanda, which we all know statistically they have no mining resources. It's a country that is covered by hills. And from 1994 till 2025 today, Rwanda export of coltan has gone from 40 ton, to 2,000 ton. Where do they get those mineral resources? And last year, 2024, Rwanda and the European Union signed a protocol that calls a memorandum of understanding for the supply of strategic mineral resources that includes lithium, cobalt, and coltan. All these resources are coming from the Republic Democratic of Congo. How do you, your institution, the European Commission, trace the originality of what Rwanda is supplying to EU for EU to meet its green transition goal. Secondly, last year there was a scandal of Apple, and I think also including Tesla, that mineral resources that were used in the production of Apple phones, of the electric vehicles, were coming from the DRC. Apple tried to call this news a fake news, but statistically it was proven. And no sanction was taken against Apple, and no sanction is being taken against Rwanda, who is basically invading another country, stealing from that country natural resources, and has been doing that for the past 3 decades. So what's your traceability? What is the use of your traceability? Because you're talking about traceability here, because for this, it's clearly seen that you do what I would call la traçabilité sous la table. Donc, vous faites semblant de prouver qu'effectivement, il y a des traçabilités, mais dans le fond, vous faites ce qui plaît, n'est-ce pas, à vous, les grandes puissances. Et c'est les pays d'Afrique qui en paient le pot cassé. Merci.
Okay, I will be brief to the point. Just a direct question addressed to our brother. You say that international superpowers have great places in your country, but we know that, but excuse me if I use this proverb, when we haven't got what we like, we must like what we have. So, ma question est la suivante. Est-ce que la RDC peut renégocier les accords inégaux qui ont été conclus, attribuant à des puissances internationales des positions dominantes? Moi, j'apprécie les efforts chinois au niveau africain, notamment dans le cadre du FOCAC, vous le savez très bien. Mais la Chine aussi utilise une stratégie d'influence. Par exemple, elle est membre du G77, plus la Chine. Elle se considère comme étant un pays en développement, developing country. So, it say that we are friends, etc. Ben, les responsabilités échouent, à mon avis, aux Congolais eux-mêmes, qui doivent s'approprier tous ces processus, redéfinir leur stratégie par rapport aux convoitises étrangères, mais il faut établir un nouveau mindset, à mon avis, et sortir de cette idée que ce sont les autres qui sont responsables de notre situation. À mon avis, cela requiert une sorte d'envolée, d'abord intellectuelle, pour pouvoir asseoir. Vous avez parlé de paradigme, de l'ARIAP. Franchement, vous avez un très beau pays, très riche, parfois même on parle d'accidents géologiques, c'est bien ça, ou de la malédiction des ressources naturelles, mais je crois que les Congolais, d'ailleurs, j'avais des amis zaïrois dans le temps, vous avez toutes les possibilités pour prendre votre envol et avoir des ailes et aller directement réaliser vos objectifs. Merci, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now I think, yeah, these are the questions. Now I will start now from the stage, not from the online.
Merci beaucoup. Pour des questions posées, je vois my sister from Zimbabwe, apparemment quand même elle s'est déplacée. Bon, elle a posé la question de savoir si la RDC avait de l'électricité. Je vais répondre à cette question. Nous n'avons pas de l'électricité. Dans la région minière du Katanga, de Copperbelt Region, nous avons un déficit de 850 MW. Je crois que la ministre l'a dit encore ce matin. C'est-à-dire qu'en termes de valeur ajoutée, si le Congo veut d'abord actuellement exporter des produits à forte valeur ajoutée, d'abord arriver au niveau d'un certain traitement, même dans le premier maillon, il nous faut 850 MW actuellement, rien que pour cette région du Katanga. Et sur les ambitions actuellement, qui sont les ambitions d'aller vers la transformation du Congo, nous voulons vraiment aller vers des maillons pour ajouter des valeurs au pays. Et pour moi, le gouvernement l'a dit à maintes fois, mais pour nous, les citoyens, quelqu'un comme moi, ce n'est pas un choix. Le Congo doit arrêter comme l'a dit d'ailleurs mon frère, on doit arrêter d'être des mines de matières premières pour donc fournir le confort aux autres, pour faire la richesse, notamment aux autres, avec la Chine, qui est d'ailleurs en train de faire les transferts des jugements pratiquement comme de quoi actuellement au Congo. Parce que l'une des conséquences, l'exportation de briques, ce que nous connaissons, vous savez qu'au Congo, vous allez trouver des mines, ce qu'on appelle des mines des scories, des tailings. Vous allez trouver des mines de tailing, parce qu'il y avait quand même un processus d'exploitation au Congo. Au jour d'aujourd'hui, nous aurons du mal à avoir même des mines, des scories de mines, parce que l'exploitation que la Chine fait d'exporter pratiquement les briques, donc on aura des mines qui vont exister en Chine. Donc pour nous, en fait, je disais, mais il n'y a pas que je suis d'accord avec vous, il n'y a pas que de l'électricité. L'ensemble de l'écosystème n'est pas en place chez nous au Congo. Ça, il faut le reconnaître. Les infrastructures de transport énergétique, de communication manquent chez nous au Congo, et ça, c'est un défi, en fait, qu'on doit relever au Congo. Alors, quand je répondais à la question, et j'en profite pour aussi toucher votre question, évidemment. Oui, je suis d'accord avec vous qu'il y a là quand même une responsabilité, parce que nous sommes conscients qu'il faut inverser. On sait quand même qu'en état une mine, nous ne gagnons rien. Ça fait des années. C'est pourquoi j'ai voulu parler du paradigme qu'il faut inverser. Parce qu'on parle de la paix. De quelle paix? Les gens sont pauvres. Les minéraux qui n'enrichissent pas les populations locales. Quand vous avez des enfants, je ne vous ai pas parlé des chiffres des enfants qui sont malnutris. Enfin, on ne peut pas parler de la paix. Et quand vous êtes dans une région déficit d'infrastructures, même l'est du pays, ça en partie un problème également de la pauvreté quand même, qui fait, malgré les convoitises un peu du Rwanda, mais ça sont des questions qu'on peut aborder dans d'autres scénarios. Donc, je voulais enterrir pour me limiter en vous disant, je comprends cela, mais la réalité, c'est laquelle? Là où je pense qu'il y a aussi une responsabilité de nos partenaires. Et nous devons être en mesure de négocier avec les partenaires, donc des économies développées. Nous avons des matières premières, et ils ont des capitaux, ils ont des technologies. On ne va pas seulement commercer les matières premières. Il faut qu'on fasse également, qu'on regarde les commercialisations de la technologie aussi. Et je suis d'accord avec vous que nous, les États africains, nous devons mettre sur la table quand même en disant, écoutez, regardez la chaîne de valeur des batteries. Je suis ici, je vais arriver ici, et peut-être 10 ans, 20 ans après. Donc je suis d'accord avec vous, mais il est important que lorsque nous parlons de sustainability, quand nous parlons de ça, il est important que nous mettions l'accent également sur les commerces équitables, dans le partage des bénéfices, parce que je pense que les partenaires en développement, les économies développées, devraient aussi comprendre ce message-là, que nous, on a des ambitions maintenant d'aller là-dessus. On ne va plus laisser l'ensemble des chaînes de batteries contrôlées uniquement par les autres. Donc, mais il est important quand même qu'on ait cette conversation-là. Et merci à vous pour les commentaires qui ont été dits ici. Je pense que c'est des questions posées à la RDC. Only 2 questions.
Yeah, I think that's enough. Thank you, Jean-Pierre. So let's stick to just like 1 minute. I think everybody's trying.
OK, thank you. Merci. Donc, j'ai noté une seule question par rapport à madame qui demandait quelle solution possible après le départ de ces sociétés. C'est vrai, le Niger, ça fait presque 50 ans que ça exploite de l'uranium, mais on n'a pas vu un changement du point de vue économique. Si vous avez vu, bon, ça a passé vite. La dernière diapositive de ma présentation, j'ai mis une photo de la route nationale de l'uranium complètement dégradée, sur laquelle passait toute la production uranifère de l'uranium, donc du Niger. Malheureusement, cette route aujourd'hui, elle est impraticable. Donc, les autorités actuelles ont voulu changer les choses en chassant, si on peut le dire, donc toutes ces sociétés pour aller sur de nouvelles bases. Aujourd'hui, vous avez des Nigériens qui ont obtenu des permis d'exploitation de l'uranium et les futures peut-être sociétés qui vont venir, ils vont avoir, les autorités vont discuter sur des bonnes bases avec gagnant-gagnant, comme on l'a dit. Mais ce qui est sûr, si le cadre juridique n'est pas respecté, on retournera toujours à la même solution. Aujourd'hui, ces sociétés qui sont parties, si elles partent définitivement, parce qu'Areva s'est mis déjà dans un courant à vendre ses actions au Niger, s'ils partent, ce qu'ils ont réussi derrière, c'est une hécatombe. C'est un truc, un désastre écologique énorme que le Niger ne peut pas gérer. Donc, voilà, la solution, c'est que les nouvelles sociétés qui vont venir respectent tous les cahiers de charges établis et sur des bases gagnant-gagnant. Voilà. Merci.
Thank you. People online, so you have 1 minute to respond to the questions that were addressed to you. Thank you.
I'll jump in because I think there was a specific question asked to me. Thanks. Thank you for the question. I first would like to just clarify a couple of aspects that I probably should have made clear at the beginning of my presentation, is that the OECD is not equivalent to the EU. We are an intergovernmental organization of 38 members, of which some are Europeans, many are not, and even some EU states are not in the OECD. So I cannot speak on behalf of the EU. That is really not the idea, but I'll still try to nuance it a little bit and provide some element of response. So I spoke about traceability, and here again, I would like to clarify, by no means the idea is for intergovernmental organizations like the OECD to undertake traceability or chain of custody. The standard asks companies to have visibility over their supply chain. So companies are responsible for this. And as I outlined in my presentation, I think the idea really is for the upstream to do this. And I think when we then come back to the question of, so coltan, obviously the situation in Central Africa and in the context of conflict in Eastern DRC and Rwanda as well, I think what really is important is the aspect of transparency. We have Ian with us, the question of EITI standards being applied in the region so that we have better access to data, including on the actual mineral production capacities, their relation to export figures. There's a big data gap that makes it a little bit difficult to understand what's actually going on. I would also like to respond to the question of transparency. The case of Apple has been mentioned again. I won't speak in favor or
30
on
seconds,
those.
please.
Okay. What is important is there that, again, the reporting by those companies on the difficulties they may face in achieving transparency is key. And I think, what we haven't seen is enough transparency in there. That being said, Apple seems to be a company that has actually reported in due diligence report on their activities, and that is something not to be acknowledged. Disregarded. I also just would like to speak on very quickly, couple of seconds, on a standard application of standards. Again, what is important to understand, the OECD guidance is a standard that has been negotiated together with African countries. This is not a standard that has been imposed, and it relates to what Jean-Pierre, I salute Jean-Pierre, but what it relates really to is how every country involved applies the standard, including the DRC, including countries where smelters are based, and OECD countries where minerals are sourced. So that is really the collective action approach that is important to make this work as a whole. Thanks.
Okay,
I hope that
thank you. Is there any questions that was addressed to Anne? No. Okay. So this is very fascinating. Thank you very much. I would like to just conclude my discussion with the following 2 points. In the conflict, peace and the conflict area, most of the time when we discuss about conflicts in Africa, we tended to categorize into two: identity-based and resource-based conflicts. I hope after a couple of years, we will stop this framing, because at the end of the day, there has to be a framework that we have to use to solve those problems. For the natural resources, I know everywhere we go, whether it's diamond or driving a beautiful car or having a very wonderful cell phone, most of the time we don't know their sources, but we enjoy them in our comfort zone. But let's hope and let's think that that joy should also be felt, that peace should also be felt in areas where those resources are produced. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the participants of our last panel. And now I kindly invite Ms. Tigisti Amare to tell us some concluding remarks. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. I know I'm standing between your free time and the conference, so I'll be very brief. As we bring this year's Africa Day to a close, I want to first of all extend thanks to all the distinguished speakers, moderators, organizers, as well as guests who joined us here in Ljubljana, as well as those that joined us virtually from across Europe, Africa, and beyond. Today's conversation on natural resources and development have been insightful, grounded in practical realities, yet hopeful and forward-looking. Whether in governance of non-renewable resources, the role of women in mining, environmental justice, water and forest protection, or peace building through inclusive resource management, the message has been clear. Africa's natural wealth must serve Africa's people. Crucially, the role of young people, Africa's most abundant natural resource, featured across discussions. Investing in youth is investing in resilience and long-term prosperity. Empowering young Africans with education, job, and many other opportunities is key to inclusive, future-focused development. The panels reminded us that when managed transparently and sustainably, natural resources can underpin prosperity and regional stability. Mismanagement, however, risks exacerbating inequality and eroding institutional trust. From infrastructure gaps to regulatory constraints, the need for strategic, coherent policies was a consistent theme. We heard compelling contributions on transforming extractive industries to support inclusive growth, innovative examples from Botswana's revenue sharing model to satellite-based water monitoring, environmental trust funds, and Morocco's state-owned entity offered concrete lessons for wider application. We also learned how even in the absence or weakness of legislative mandates, some mining companies are proactively investing in decarbonization plans, an encouraging sign of private sector alignment with the national sustainability goals. This year's event continues a valued tradition of collaboration between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and European Affairs of the Republic of Slovenia, the EU Commission, and Chatham House's Africa Programme that began in 2017. And I'm very proud and honored that we have been part of that journey. Over the years, through this conference, we have jointly explored critical issues, including sustainable water management, digital transitions, climate security, and issues of economic transformation and governance, always with African agency at the center. This year's conference placed natural resources and development at the forefront. For many African countries, natural wealth remains a paradox, a source of great promise and historically vulnerability. Today's discussions challenged us to turn that paradox into a platform, one grounded in equity, sustainability, and mutual accountability. The partnership between Slovenia and Chatham House is meaningful, not only because of our shared commitment to dialogue, but because of how that dialogue is held, inclusively, respectfully, and with a focus on tangible outcomes. We're proud that this event continues to bridge not only regions, but also sectors, bringing together ministers and miners, academics and activists, geologists and artists. Slovenia's continued leadership reflected in its diplomatic outreach, including the recent opening of embassies in Addis Ababa and Algiers, underscores its commitment to long-term strategic partnership across the continent. At Chatham House, We see this cooperation as a model, an example of how meaningfully we can support dialogue on interregional collaboration that is built on mutual respect, shared learning, and a joint commitment to better policy making. On behalf of Chatham House, thank you again. We look forward to continuing this journey together.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Ms. Amare. I forgot to actually introduce you, Deputy Director for Africa Program at the Chatham House. Thank you for being with us. Let me also thank you on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs. It was an immense pleasure to have you all here, and of course also that you stayed until the very end. And I think at the end, the debate was the most lively, you know. I remember, and I was discussing with Ladies Ambassador, and they were suggesting, let's have more active discussions. And I think we will consider this and, of course, also take this into account. They also suggested to add into the program a bit of a touristic dimension. We will also be reflecting upon this for the next year's edition. You are also, of course, all kindly invited to join us for the Africa Day of 2026. I really hope you will be with us here because the debate with you is always enriching us, and of course, also bilaterally, Slovenia would like to promote cooperation with each and every country in Africa, because we are for partnership, we are for exchanging best practices and exchanging knowledge and technology, and I think we have an immense potential in these areas. And please, all of you, stay inspired, and this is, I'm also speaking for Slovenians, stay inspired by Africa, because we have so much to learn from you. Thank you everyone for coming, and please enjoy the concert tonight, and of course, some amazing food offered, I think by Vivo, is it? Okay, thank you all. Have a nice evening.